Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox Studios and thanks for logging on. This is Watches Tonight. This evening we chat live, we discuss the best dive watches for summer 2023, and I share your viewer wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. Sean's on the switcher, we've got our live audience appearing in the box. Edward Ledden of Sweden is first, we've got Enrique Casiano, Matt Foster, Dan CT, Mark S. from Brooklyn, Richard Combs from South Florida, Nate Dogg, Simon Holt, Ordinary 999 joining in from Norway, staying up late in Europe. All right, guys, check out our new Watchbox app. The best way to get news while it's still new. We have a media feed, including blogs, journals, and magazines, and you can customize it to see only your favorites. There's also a video viewer where you can see this very program, as well as my on-the-wrist reviews and our collector conversations. Plus, you can use the valuation tool to check the value of one watch or all the watches in your collection and browse the latest from the Watchbox. Check it out on the Apple App Store or Google Play. And join me. The official after party of Watches Tonight is my Instagram account. Right there you can see our latest. I only choose the most interesting watches from our collection, including some not listed on our website. Check out Tim_Masso on Instagram. We've got Tom joining in. We've got Juan Carlos, first time catching the live. Hello, good to see you, Juan. Welcome from Mexico. Happy to see that. We've got Jens from Frankfurt, the home of Sinn. We've got Miroslav joining in from the Balkans, I believe. We've got Horology Homies from Garden City, New York, not far from my homeland of Northern Long Island. And AJ Watches staying up late in Liverpool. We've got Dixon Lee, Robert Dixon of Scotland, and Quicker Than Drawing, who I imagine must be a photographer. All right, jumping into our viewer wrist shots, we've got Nishant P, who starts us off with a spectacular shot of his MB&F Legacy Machine Sequential Evo and BMW M8 competition. We've got Tarek H and his Moser Cie Monard Palladium cruising in his BMW. We've got Angie R of Texas, proving that we have lady collectors too, who explores the Mexican Pacific coast with her Rolex Submariner Cermet, that is ceramic Kermit. And we have Mike P of Omaha, Nebraska, taking delivery of his new Rolex Daytona Wear It in Good Health Mike. Finally, we've got Jens E, who sports his Panerai Luminor Marina PAM 299, a model he originally discovered on Watchbox Reviews, which is my review channel. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com and see your wrist on my list. Okay, who else? Brian Adams joining in from Alaska, Joey B from the Philly suburbs, Brick Lane, MH Cooper, and quite a few friends. We've got Chris F from South Miami, our old stomping ground in the Watch You Want neck of the woods, Jim Millett, John S saying it's Masso Monday, time to talk watches. I like the sound of that, alliterative, excellent. Okay, jumping straight in, guys, we're going to talk about the 2023 Rolex Submariner as it meets its matches. Now, we do a couple of dive watch shows each year, but usually it's just dive watches generally. Tonight we're going to talk about watches you might buy instead of Submariner. Some are a little bit bigger, some are a little bit smaller, some a bit more expensive, some considerably less expensive, but all of them are viable options if you're looking for or waiting for a Rolex Sub. And the Sub is 70 this year. That doesn't mean it's outlasted its rivals. The most copied watch of all time has arguably created the most popular genre of all time, as the standard office watch the world around is the dive watch. Today, the king of dive watches faces pretenders to the crown, and I'm striving to avoid watches that we've covered recently in other topics on the show. So let the games begin with alternatives from the world of Rolex itself. So we're going to talk about some watches here that are not strictly speaking divers, but are great Submariner surrogates. Let's talk a little bit about what you get with the 2023 Submariner. Originally came out in 1953, arguably the archetype of the modern dive watch, and updated continuously and conservatively ever since. Evergreen design is one of its points of appeal. Now, redesigned in 2020, we got a few changes, not big ones, but the headliner was a new 41mm case. In truth, it doesn't measure a millimeter larger. I've measured it, it's more like 7/10 of a millimeter. And you got a new 70-hour movement, the Chronergy Escapement caliber 3235. Seen it many different places in the Rolex catalog, but it finally joined the Submariner lineup, and a few new colors, especially where bezels and dial combinations are considered. So the bracelet end links also increased by 1mm, thinning out the lugs for a better match between end link width and end taper profile on the lugs themselves. It's not as brutal as it used to be, and you can see that in the lug profile right there. Pricing, of course it went up, and as of 2023, it's $10,250 for the most popular model, which is the standard Submariner date. So a Submariner with the date, the 126610LN for Lunette Noire. Now, a green bezel raises the price and the stakes, as these have a longer wait list. This is a $10,800 watch, new. Pre-owned, it's going to be more like 20 grand or over. And you can also step down, as the standard no-date sub, properly known as the Submariner, is $9,100. So now we know what we're dealing with. Let's take a look at the most obvious alternative within the Rolex watch collection. No, it's not a sea dweller. I think if you're going for a 41mm sub, if you don't go for that sub, your next play should be the all-new 42mm Rolex Yachtmaster RLX Titanium. So this is an interesting piece. Now in titanium, and this is a new thing for Rolex, we only got this on the Deep Sea Challenge of last year. So here we have our first non-50mm titanium Rolex, in other words, one you can wear. There's a lot to love with this sub surrogate. No, it's not a dive watch, but it is a rotating bezel caliber 3235 on a full bracelet, and it just looks like a Rolex. Anywhere in the world, if you ask people, what does a Rolex look like? If they draw the watch, it's going to look something like this. Unless you're a diver, it's all the same. And it's the sub's cooler and younger brother, so you might even argue it's a little bit more appealing. This one has a matte bezel, a matte dial, and a case that is all satin finish, including those lovely lugs. Take a look. Those lugs have those bevels that we loved in the 20th century on Rolex and Tudor sports watches. Well, they're back. Yes, mechanically applied, but also beautiful and nostalgic, and I'm happy they're here. This full satin watch is larger than a sub, but arguably less ostentatious, as it doesn't glint and gleam in the sun. And they really sweated the details, as even the metallic lip of the titanium bezel base is satinated. Satin brushed clasp too. Now inside this clasp you're going to get a Easy Link system. It's not glide lock, which I regret. It probably should have been, but you do get Easy Link. You do get 3 divots for restationing the bracelet. This Rolex costs more to own, and by the way, there's a new titanium crown. Rolex crowns always feature a signature that lets you know whether it's trip lock or twin lock and what material it's made of. So if you want a trip lock made of titanium, it's going to be 2 dots and a slash. This is all new symbology on Rolex watches. So you got the matte black dial, and you've got this look that's almost like a Bamford Submariner. If Rolex offered a factory Bamfordized Submariner, it would probably look an awful lot like the new RLX Titanium Yachtmaster 42. And you do get a lot to love. It's lighter than a sub. It's going to be hypoallergenic. 904L steel causes allergic reactions in some folks. It's got a lot of nickel in the alloy. You don't get that problem with titanium, and it's grade 5 tie, which is the good stuff. Now the watch has got a rotating bezel. It's not unidirectional, but it is ceramic capped, and it's fine for timing. If you're not relying on it as a backup dive timer and your life isn't on the line, this is just fine for timing. And you're going to appreciate that this watch in a lot of ways is more unique than the Submariner. Having just been launched, there are so few of them. So for $14,050, you're getting something that is both very different and, for now, very rare. That said, the original Yachtmaster 40 is still highly appealing. You can get the 40mm, I guess they call it Rhodium, steel and platinum bezel rhodium dial Rolex Yachtmaster, mechanically identical to the sub and the Yachtmaster 42. This one's got a dark rhodium dial with some cyan accents, white gold hands and indices. It's got a solid platinum bidirectional yachtsman's bezel. It's 100 meters, but you're never going to go deeper than that. It's got the Easy Link system inside of the bracelet. It's a lovely watch, and it's more affordable at $12,300. Step back a generation and get the reference 116622, and you're going to find pre-owned. It's quite accessible and quite available, as few of those were made. So you get either the current gen Rhodium or the previous gen Rhodium, and a wonderful shortcut to Rolex rotating bezel ownership compared to a sub. We've got James C. saying, I love my 37mm Yachtmaster, and you should. That's a lovely midsize. Jim Millett saying, the 42mm titanium Yachtmaster is my favorite Rolex release at 23, and I think I'm on board with you on that count. We have Brick Lane saying, Breguet desperately needs to revive the 1646 diver into a re-edition. Come on, Breguet, we've waited long enough. I second that. We have Miroslav saying, I like this titanium Yachty, And then we have Time Hill saying, love this sub review. It's in, it's out, it's down, it's dirty, and it's honest. We're not going to dwell too much on the sub because we're talking about alternatives tonight, but I need to let you know what those alternatives are up against. Alan C. saying Bathyscaphe 38. I like the sound of that. Is that a good guess there? Maybe. You're going to have to stay with us to find out. All right, moving on now. Within the world of Rolex, we also have Tudor. And let's look very different. A total upside down dive watch from Tudor that was lambasted on its launch, a rare misfire in the Black Bay collection. This is my favorite Tudor dive watch that is not left-hand drive, and it is the Tudor Black Bay P01, the most controversial Tudor since the ungainly but useful Iconaut of the 2000s. So what are we getting? Well, here's the thing. Back in 2019, Tudor had a social media tease campaign that led a lot of folks to believe a Tudor Submariner reissue was coming, and not a Submariner-like watch like the Black Bay, but a true Submariner branded Tudor Submariner re-edition. And instead, the watch people expected turned out to be this, which was anything but what they expected. Based on a 1967 prototype created for what was expected to be a military issue, this thing threw everyone for a loop. It's 42 millimeters in stainless steel, but at 55.7 millimeters from lug to lug, it wears huge. It wears like a deep sea. It's that big. And over the edge of my wrist, you can see that's it on my wrist, and it's just as wide as it looks. It is an absolute vault of a watch, and you need a big wrist. 42 isn't normally this big. This thing wears almost like an IWC Big Pilot, and it's right down to the shape of it and the size of the lugs. But if you have the arm for it, this is the most interesting and unusual diver that Tudor makes. On that basis, only the sterling silver Black Bay 58 is really a rival. This thing is super cool. The bezel locking system is very neat. It's part of what makes this watch and the original prototype unique. You can see how the upper lug actually steps out and unlocks the 12-hour bezel. Unusual bezel, unusual lock system, and you could see how brutal those crown guards and lugs are. This thing really is cut from raw cloth, designed like the military prototype it was back in the 60s. I hope there are more Rolex Tudor watches like the Tudor Black Bay P01. We always want them to take risks, but then again, we always complain when they do. Maybe they know our preferences better than we do, but I continue to root for Tudor to do weird stuff, like the P01, like the Cognac Dial Heritage Advisor, like the Black Bay 58 925 sterling silver. Sometimes it pays off, but the result is always interesting, and probably someday collectible, because they didn't make too many of those. Cost $4,250. This is nowhere near the most expensive Tudor dive watch you can buy. It's still a lot of money though, but it's entry level by today's standards, and certainly compared to the 15 to 17 grand people are paying for pre-owned Submariner dates right now. Okay, sticking with Tudor, Pelagos 39. Let's see what you guys are saying in the box before we jump in. Antelope 1013 saying our good friend's MB&F Chrono is insane, and I've got to agree. We've got Miroslav saying, I like all watches, but the P01 is super ugly. That's okay. We're all entitled to our opinions. Controversy can sometimes be good. It would be annoying if we all sort of liked watches. We should either love or hate designs. I believe the old Tom Gale Chrysler school of design. The people who love will buy, the people who hate will not, but if people just like, no one buys. We've got Florent K joining in from Kosovo, the land of Recep, and we have Brick Lane saying JLC also needs a nice diver. What JLC needs is a diver that's not a retro piece. Bring back the master compressor diving. And then we have Mr. 19 saying the new Yachtmaster is more impossible to get than a Daytona. For now, that's true. CLF saying hi guys. Hi CLF, welcome. We're glad to have you with us. Andrew T saying maybe even a love child of the SKX and the Deep Sea Special. I'm guessing that's how he sees the P01. And we have Kyle P, who loves my Saxon Wheels of Steel album cover shirt right there. By the way, do you notice how it's wire Wheels of Steel? It's very motorcycle oriented. A very cool album. Every single track is rocking on that one. Okay, RS from Australia, making it live for the first time. Thank you for joining us and for getting up early with us. What else is going on? Keystar G60. Have many Rolex executives gone on to spearhead more radical brands? As far as I know, no. I see people enter. It's a one-way door. I don't see many people exit. I've seen a handful of Rolex people go to work at Tudor, but it's very rare that you see someone just hit the market where they say, and by the way, he was COO of Rolex, and now he's running HYT. Although something almost like that happened with Davide Cerrato going to HYT from Montblanc, but by way of Tudor. Anyway, he's running Bremont. All the best of luck to him right now. So jumping forward, we have viewer wrist shots after the Tudor Pelagos 39. What can I say about the Pelagos 39? New in 22, 39mm titanium no date. It's not a retro play. The Pelagos has always had a little bit of a Tudor snowflake tribute in the way the dial is styled, but it's always been the modern watch, whereas the Black Bay has been a more entry-level priced retro style. And this is a great piece. It's just smaller than the standard Pelagos. So same running gear as a Black Bay 58. It's the caliber 5400 inside, chronometer, anti-magnetic, 70 hours, automatic. A little bit less water resistance at 200 meters than a big Pelagos, but then again, you're never going to go deeper than that. It's got the T-fit clasp, which isn't quite as deluxe as what you get on the standard Pelagos 42, but it's still a lovely refinement that in many ways is better than Rolex EasyLink. And at $4,600 with a 5-year warranty that now matches that you get from Rolex, this is a really compelling alternative to the Rolex Submariner. Remember, the Submariner is the one without a date. Technically, there's no such thing as a no date. The 124060 is going to be the alternative. The Rolex is 9100. This is 4600. Advantage Tudor, and again, it's in titanium, which is still something Tudor does more than Rolex does. Viewer wrist shots number 2. I teased it, now Shane C is on your screen, and we can see on his wrist we've got a Tudor Black Bay 58 exploring Zion's National Park in Utah, USA. Wide open country in the United States of America. I love the USA. Edward B captures the golden glow of his IWC Aqua Timer dive watch, an underrated line from IWC. We have Derek W in his Cartier Santos pilot's watch gearing up to fly appropriately from Detroit Metro Airport. That's right, the Santos 1904, the first pilot's watch. Terry R rolls in his Volvo XC90 with the Steinhardt Ocean 1 Bronze Diver. We love all watches here, and we love all cars. He says he's got over 100,000 miles on the Volvo. They are, after all, durable cars and trucks. Abdul R of Germany shares our program's first RZE Valor chronograph. We've never had one of these before. Good looking watch. I see a little bit of Zenith A384 in there. Good looking watch. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your watch in this box. All right, Thomas Burnett saying, love the original Pelagos. As good a tool watch as a sub, I feel. The Sun is more jewelry these days. RP saying, Tim, I finally found a new old stock Zenith Captain Windsor Boutique Edition after seeing your review on it a number of years ago. Thank you for recommending such an amazing watch. Oh, I'm so jealous. Guys, you need to open up a different window. Check out that boutique edition of the Ludwig Oxlin designed El Primero annual calendar palladium smoke dial. What a machine, and one of the best that Zenith's done. Watches like that are one of the reasons that Jean-Frédéric Dufour got tapped to run Rolex. James Sharon saying, I have a Steinhardt 39, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Send me a wrist shot of it. Abdullah from Germany saying, thanks, Tim. Definitely has a great color combo. On point with the design cue right there. Okay, best dive watches of 2023 continued. Omega, you knew they'd be in here, and this is a great one. So Omega, this is where the real rivals from outside the Rolex Tudor family need to begin. Since 1957, the sub's arch nemesis has been the Seamaster dive watch, and it's often been a better value, giving you comparable engineering, water resistance, durability, and longevity. And admittedly, Omega poached Rolex's traditional James Bond action with a huge infusion of Swiss francs back in 1995. For 2022, Omega added a mesh bracelet variant of the Diver 300 meter that was made famous on the wrist of Pierce Brosnan in the 90s and early 2000s. It's got a dial where you really see the Brosnan era influence, including the Omega Wave as well as the skeleton hands. Now the rest of the watch, right down to the straight bars and the mesh bracelet, is also designed to evoke some of the Seamaster 300s that were military issued in the British Ministry of Defense during the 1960s. That was very much the period when Bond was wearing Rolex, when when Sean Connery had the role, but it was also a period when the relationship between British services and Omega was even more real and a very valid piece of Omega history. So this watch draws on the real, which is the Ministry of Defense heritage, and the not so real but fun, which is the James Bond connection of the 90s. Technically, this one is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter James Bond 60th anniversary, and it celebrated the 60th anniversary of the cinematic James Bond since 1962's Dr. No. It has a colorful glow, as you can see. Easy to register the 60 on the bezel, which is there instead of an index because 60 years, duh. And then you can see that the skeleton hand is green, so it's easy to read the elapsed time index to hand at a glance. NATO strap accessory comes with this watch, and it's a good one with Omega branded stainless steel hardware and a lovely gray and blue striped pattern. $7,100 for this is an excellent value. 42 millimeters to 41 on the Rolex. The sizing is very close. There's no competition in terms of price though, as you'll be getting this for tens of thousands less than the Rolex, and you'll be taking delivery at the dealer when you request it, not years after you request it. I would also say the tribute to 60 years of the cinematic James Bond and the early years of Omega's ongoing Bond adventure is worthwhile in and of itself. I have the original version of the Bond Seamaster. It's my graduation watch. It's one of my never sells. Start your own tradition with one of these. Okay, someone guessed this, and I'm glad they did, because we need to talk about another swatch group option, smaller this time, the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe 38. Now the Bathy 38 came out in 2017, and it is probably the one to own. This is an unbelievable timepiece. What do you get? Well, if 41 millimeters of Submariner bloat is too many for you, and you want something that wears like a 50s or 60s sub, Blancpain is the answer. Or I suppose I should say Blancpain, so you don't get offended. There is a proper pronunciation. There's also the US market when they use the boutiques. We'll go with Blancpain, just so everyone's happy. Now, we've said enough previously about the 45mm 50 and the 43mm bathyscaphe, but this 38mm diver from the 50 Fathoms line looks awesome. Check it out on my wrist. There's no such thing as 38 being a lady's watch right here. This is for him, this is for her, this is for me, as this really is the best case option they have. If it were ceramic, it would be perfect. It's stainless steel, and it's priced accordingly, quite attractively, I should mention. But it's a wonderful watch to wear and examine with pride, because unlike the Rolex, this is a hand-finished, artisanally made horlogerie timepiece with a lot of movement refinement in addition to the case and the dial, hand-finished bevels, black polished screws, solarized barrels, 100 hours of power reserve, free sprung with an anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, and this is respectable finishing that will shame not just Rolex, but the ostensibly horlogerie and competing Audemars Piguet Royal Oak offshore diver, which is made only a few kilometers from the Blancpain factory. So this thing has it going on. Men with a taste for classical vintage sizes and women are going to love the way it fits and the way it sits. And this steel Blancpain costs $10,100, which is Submariner competitive, but you're getting a real horlogerie watch that is hand finished and hand executed with a special kind of low volume beauty that no Submariner will ever have. Unless you have something super rare from the 50s, like 6202 or something weird like that with an Explorer dial. This is going to be a lot more exclusive than any sub. All right, let's see what you guys are saying right here. Brick Lane, 38mm, fantastic case size. Alan C, love this bathyscaphe 38mm. A question from Keeping Watch UK, why are the markers so tiny on this though? I guess they reduced everything in proportion from the 43mm watch. We have Troller saying the Omega Watch Co. 300 is Omega's best unreleased modern vintage. And then we have Philip L. saying, I love the idea of the IWC GST Deep 1. Indeed, the landmark mechanical depth gauge GST Deep 1 of 1999 sort of set a mark for unusual complications that were also groundbreaking and showed what could still be done to make a professional grade mechanical diver in the modern era, that it wasn't just about quartz. Plus, if you've ever seen the original Deep One, it came with an incredible boxed set of literature and test equipment for the depth gauge. A very cool watch, but if you get one, get it full boxed set, because the set really matters. We have Michael asking, Seamaster or Planet Ocean for my 65-year-old dad with bad eyes. He's a blue water certified sailor. I would say consider a Seamaster Diver 300 meter in ceramic, because that one is 43.5 millimeters bigger with a larger target, larger hands, larger indices. Or see if you could get the broadsword hand 1998 dial. It was designed after the 1998 Seamaster 300 GMT. They made a version of the Diver 300 meter with those same hands and indices, with ultimate contrast and all the same fine chronometer qualities, diving clasp, robust bracelet, the size, everything about it was fantastic. See if you can find one of those pre-owned in good shape. Your dad will thank you. But if you want a big target, get the 43.5 millimeter ceramic, circa 2019 first version of the Seamaster Diver 300 meter. That'll give your dad a big target as well as a great deal of durability to go out at sea. We have Thomas Burnett saying the Glasuta Original CQ has to be in this lineup. Unfortunately, it's not, because I ran out of space and I didn't want everything to be dominated by Rolex and Swatch Group products. But I will say, if you can wear a 43-ish millimeter watch that wears more like a 45, if we're honest, the CQ Panorama Date is a fantastic example. A low volume watch, a small kind of niche watch nerd brand. You get a super high quality case and bezel. You get wonderful bezel action with a super smooth glide. You get a 100-hour movement that's as good as any chronometer and made in-house. Not only is the movement made in-house, but they make the tools that's used to make the movements. So if you can get the GO-CQ Panorama Date, black, green, blue, they're all great. I love them, but you do need a big wrist to wear them. And that's probably the #1 reason they don't feature here, because even with the Swatch Group and Rolex Universe stuff, I probably still would have thrown it in here if it weren't so large. It's a 43-ish, but it wears more like a 45. And that's the only reason I haven't included it. But I did a mini review right there, so I hope that holds us over. We might do a whole Geo episode just to make up for the lack of coverage of that brand. We got Nate Dogg saying, just got my two-tone Rolex Bluesy sub from Watchbox last week, truly enjoying it. Thank you, Jason Main. Thank you for shouting out Watchbox and Jason. Jason is a good man. He really is. And he's one of us. He probably owns, I'd say, 20 different watches of various tech and spec. Alfonso joining in from Wigan. Alfonso G, thank you so much for joining us. All right, H. Moser Cie, the Pioneer rotating bezel. This is actually a 100-piece limited edition for 2022 for the US market. Normally, the Pioneers are 42.8 millimeters, stainless steel, and they come on straps. This watch changed enough that I could suddenly make direct Submariner comparisons. It's got a smoked funky blue dial, and the indices are actually solid applied blocks of ceramic lume. The bezel insert is a rare titanium insert with inlaid ceramic lume, so the full bezel is lumed. The Pioneer back in 2015 was nothing like this. In fact, the watch was originally almost 43 millimeters, only on a strap, and made of precious metal. This edition differed from the previous Pioneers in being on a bracelet, which was seen but uncommon on the other ones. What was not seen before was the combination of the 40 millimeter case, titanium construction, and the rotating bezel, making for a full bracelet watch that was suddenly directly competitive with the 41 millimeter steel full bracelet Submariner. And when you get it, you get an accessory rubber strap. So you've even got a little bit of style flexibility that you don't get on a sub unless you go aftermarket. And all of this made it so comparable to the sub that I actually shot this comparison I keep talking about. And you can see side by side, they've got a lot in common. The Rolex is more case, the Moser is more bezel. But other than that, there's really no comparison. The Moser's a lot more expensive, but also a lot more handmade and a lot more exclusive. I also think it has more soul and character. The ceramic lume blocks and the fully loomed bezel give this a wonderful night aspect that the sub doesn't have, as the sub has only a luminescent pearl on its bezel, And you can see how they loomed the hands with the ceramic on top of the hands. It's just so special. And it's got a super chunky bezel. If you want a bezel that sounds like a belt-fed machine gun, this is it. Rolex bezels, they glide. Moser bezels, they snap, and they snap beautifully. It has an HMC 200 caliber that is artisanally made in-house and a 3-day power reserve. And you can see it, which you can't on a Rolex. Plus, expensive at $19,900, but would you rather have a 40mm titanium Moser diver for about 20 grand that's largely handmade and only built in 100 copies, or a white gold sub for over twice that? You pay a lot more for the white gold sub. I think you get a lot less. Frankly, for half that money, give me the titanium Moser any day of the week. Changing materials changes the calculus of the Submariner replacements. Okay, what's going on here? Mark S, 60-click bezel on this. Yes, some people love, some people hate, but I will say this, the action, the actual detent is superb. But if you're not a 60-click bezel guy, if you want 120, stay tuned, there's more coming. We have right here Jim Millett saying that the Blancpain 50 Fathoms mil spec is an amazing piece. I believe that's the reference 5008 with the 40.3mm case. That's a very cool piece, and I do like that quite a bit. Question from Mason, has he done the 50 Fathoms 38mm bathyscaphe? Rewind once you've watched the show and check it out. And then right here we have M. Pesh saying that Moser is awesome, and I agree with you. If I were to buy another dive watch today, it would probably be between that and the titanium 50 Fathoms. What else is going on? Brick Lane saying Rolex needs to make a full platinum diver. I would love to see a full platinum anniversary Submariner Rolex. It's probably too late to get started, but if you've got something like that in the pipeline for later this year, I would be so thrilled to see that. Ice blue dial, ice blue ceramic bezel on a sub, anyone? Or ice blue dial, chocolate ceramic bezel insert like the Daytona. How cool would that be? Plus, how cool would it be if they included an accessory Oyster Flex strap? All right, let's keep rolling. Mason 1 saying, Moser's awesome, have the heritage funky blue. I still want a Moser Pioneer 43. I definitely endorse that ambition. Okay, jumping into something a lot more affordable and a lot more extreme. The Sinn UX SDR, also known as the Easy M2B, part of the Mission Timer series. This is Sinn Hydro technology, something extremely unique. Oil-filled watch. Other than once upon a time, Bell & Ross, and I guess Ressence, you're not going to find any oil-filled watches. So here's why. Same index of refraction as a sapphire. So if you look at it from any angle, above or below the waves, you can read it from any angle. And the oil is incompressible, which results in a 5,000 meter, yes, 5,000 meter water resistance. The hands rotate inside an oil bath, and the watch will not fog or cloud under any conditions. Back in the 1992 to 2002 period, when Sinn built all of the Bell & Ross watches, they built the Bell & Ross Hydromax, which came out in 1997 and was the trial run for this oil-filled watch technology. It was Bell & Ross's watch, but it was Sinn's technology and fabrication. Today you can still get this oil-filled diver technology in the UX series. The watch, bezel, case, and bracelet, full tegument. You can take a razor blade or a key to this case, savage it, and wipe the key or the blade off of the case with no permanent marks to the tegument. That's how hard tegument is. It's over 1,200 Vickers. Plus, the bracelet, it's beautifully built. Removable links held by hex screws, which can take more torque without stripping than flathead screws, and it has a dive extension. Captive bezel, so the bezel's held on by screws. You can't snap it off with an impact. It's resistant down to negative 20 degrees Celsius or up to positive 60 degrees Celsius, which is freezing and boiling. And yes, it's quartz, but get over it. This is a luxury quartz. This is a lasting, serviceable quartz. ETA 955, 652 Thermaline series, the same thing that goes into the Breitling Super Quartzes. Accurate to plus or minus 10 seconds a year and thermocompensated. The watch is big by our standards for this series, 44 millimeters, but it's only 13.3 millimeters thick, so it's thickness competitive with the Submariner. Plus, it has an ambidextrous crown alignment, so, you know, lefties and righties, you're good to go. Okay, so Its loom is outrageous, as with all Sinn divers, and note they loomed the seconds hand, which everyone should do, but not everyone does. The Sinn UX SDR pricing is quite attractive at $3,260, and expect this one to survive a lot of stuff that's going to kill the owner. Nice to know. I'm not sure it's a comforting thought, but it's nice to know. Okay, we have Brick Lane saying my E39 is leaking oil again. I assume we're talking about a BMW right there. Nice car, but yes, they leak oil. Also, they eat oil in water pumps. What else is going on here? We have Alan C saying, yeah, this Sinn is super cool. We've got Zachary Weaver saying, love to see Tim get really excited about hypotheticals. And then we have Zach Schlabach saying, late but made it to the party. And we were so glad that you did. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. We've got 315 concurrent viewers. I feel like a celebrity. Oh my gosh, this is how it feels to be Ed Sheeran or Justin Bieber. Guys, keep it going. I'm flattered. Okay, we have Brian McCarthy saying, do find Sinn very appealing, and RNS saying, why doesn't Rolex get into Tegament if it's so solid? I would imagine it's a combination of the way it looks, it's always kind of yellow tinged, and possibly patents. Also, carburized steel might be difficult to mass produce, and mass produced, that's kind of the Rolex MO. They don't do a lot of low volume cases, even though, granted, they have the tech. If they want to do it, they could do it, and I highly encourage them to do so. But it would also sort of involve admitting that their 904L Oyster steel is not the be-all and end-all. Viewer wrist shots, I asked, you answered. George Y, you're up. Of Michigan, this man doesn't hold back with his watch box bought Rolex Datejust RBR. Thank you for trusting our company. Jimmy Y goes diving for football history with his Tudor Pelagos and the Unitas Trophy. Of course, being a watch nerd, when he sent me the comment about the Unitas Trophy, I'm like, the Unitas Trophy, what is that? What does this have to do with movements? The Johnny Unitas Trophy right there. We've got UDH of Melbourne, Australia, going for a drive, not a dive, a drive, with his PAM 915 and Porsche Cayenne GTS Coupe. And we've got Dr. Scott of Raleigh, North Carolina, shares my taste in neon-colored Milgauss, looking good with your Z Blue there. Jason C. and Savannah the Bulldog, adorable. Appreciate his Rolex Sea Dweller 43. We love our watches and wheels and watches and whiskers shot. Even if you've just got a chinchilla or hamster or guinea pig, send them to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your pet on this set. All right. Now, Best Divers of 2023 continued. Finally, we reached my favorites. These are the weird ones, guys. Let's talk about Cartier, the recently discontinued Calibre de Cartier diver. I say 2023 because you can still find these new old stock and in Cartier dealers, so look around for buys. This launched in 2014 with a black dial and a black bezel, and in 2016 in blue, like you see right here. The blue one actually has a ceramic bezel. The black one has ADLC. Go for the blue one. I think it's more attractive, it's less common, and it's got the ceramic bezel, which is just that extra feather in its cap. This is a surprisingly committed and high-grade dive watch. First, 42 millimeters in steel, but super slim at a verified, that is, I measured 11 millimeters thick. It is one of the thinnest dive watches I have ever encountered, and solidly thinner than the Rolex. It has the industry's most refined bezel feel. It ties and maybe even exceeds Rolex with 120 silky smooth but well-defined clicks. And the knurling is easy to grip. Very respectable Cartier automatic caliber, giving it a 42 to 48 hour power reserve. But what really sets it apart is that Cartier boasted loudly that this was a real ISO 6425 tested and validated dive watch that was actually tested at the factory to 125% of its 300-meter rating before it goes to the customer. The lume glow, like few others, by the way, you can instantly tell that's a Cartier diver, and it's a rare small seconds diver that works because they lume the small seconds hand but also the seconds track. Full bracelet, you can get it in full bracelet or on a strap. I say get the bracelet, buy the strap as an accessory for best value. Reasonable price for the quality and the rock solid brand like Cartier. No longer made, but like I said, still available new old stock either from dealers or gray market. Was $9,650 on a bracelet, $9,000 on the strap. Seek bargains, new old stock still in the box, or pre-owned, still under warranty. And yes, there is a difference between gray market and pre-owned. Gray market is an authorized dealer that sells the watch to an unauthorized dealer that sells the watch to an end user. Pre-owned is a dealer that's authorized, sells the watch to a guy who is the end user, who sells the watch to either another collector or a pre-owned dealer, who then sells it to a pre-owned dealer. Get it? Got it? Good. Okay, jumping back, we have Sam Leno joining in. Hi Tim, sorry if I'm late. No apologies necessary, Sam. We're glad you're here with us. RNS saying the Roman numerals are too intense. Young Brando saying Cartier, he's a fan. I'm a fan of Cartier. I think you're a fan of Cartier. We have Miroslav saying, I always had a crush for this Cartier. I was considering, but I still love it. And then we have Nate Dogg saying, not a diver, but anyone have any thoughts on the Louis Erard plus Messina Lab Regulateur? Yeah, nice watch. I'd say Louis Erard is one of those turnaround stories with Manuel Emck, a guy who helped to reestablish Jacques Hedreau. He led Romain Jerome to its resurgence, and he left long before the bottom fell out. And then he was brought on board for Louis Erard and really is doing everything he did at his prior charges to rebuild the brand and make it genuinely cool, including collaborations like Vianney Halter, Alain Silberstein, and of course Messina Lab. I like it. I think it's a cool watch on both fronts. Louis Erard and Messina Lab. William Messina, a very cool dude and a collector's collector. Mark S. saying, Tim, do Watchbox customers get better deals on trade-ins or straight purchases? Trade-ins. You'll always get more value for a trade than if you decide to sell the watch outright. So, for example, you're going to trade a watch in and the buy price is like $4,000, you might be able to trade it for like $4,500. You always get more value for a trade than an outright sale. Okay, B Prime, thoughts on the ceramic Omega Speedmaster line? Glad I finally checked out the show live. Yeah, I like them a lot. I think the Apollo 8 was the high watermark in terms of ambition and style, but I think if I were to wear one every day, the super cool gray side of the moon with its platinum dial and fully loomed tack and crown would be the one I would ultimately choose for myself. I think that's super cool. But if Omega really wants to peg the meter, give us one of those dark side of the moon ceramic cases with the caliber 321. Please make that happen, Omega. All right, jumping back into our regularly scheduled program, Grand Seiko. Diver's Watch, SBGA 463. Honestly, even in titanium, this one is less of a one-for-one Submariner replacement, more like an alternative for dive watch buyers who think the sub's too small and don't want a garden variety sea dweller type watch. 44.8 millimeters, grade 5 titanium. The SBGA 463 is large but light on the wrist. Launched in 2021, it's still fairly new, and the presence of spring drive in a diver, a Grand Seiko diver, also remains novel. Caliber 9R65, 15 seconds accurate a month. 72-hour power reserve, automatic, and this is a 200-meter ISO 6425 2018 compliant dive watch, so the latest spec. This is the first professional grade Grand Seiko dive watch made in series. Grand Seiko bezel refinement rivals Cartier and Rolex for best in the industry, and the hand craftsmanship of the dial, the case, and the movement easily justifies its $7,300 retail price, something uncommonly seen on Swiss watches priced under 10 grand. And it's got a hugely extensible clasp that's got an enormous range of adjustment built into it. You can see that right there. Okay, guys. Here's another weird one that I bet you didn't see coming. You saw the Grand Seiko, and maybe that's a little bit predictable, but did you see Chanel and the Chanel J12? And yes, 38 millimeters, full ceramic in white or black. The J12 has been around since 2000, originally launched as a ladies' watch. I do not consider 38 millimeter to be a ladies' watch, especially in 2023. This ain't 2008 with 45, 46, 48 millimeter divers. This is nearly impossible to scratch. Case, clasp, and bracelet. G&F Chatelain ceramic, which is made inside of the Chanel group. This is one of the finest case makers in the world. And they are a Chanel company making the Chanel cases, clasps, and bracelets. This is as good as anything made by anyone, and it's a huge part of the appeal of this watch. You get a Tudor Kinesi movement, which is the same as the one in the Pelagos, 3 days, automatic, chronometer grade, 200-meter diver, full bridge, free sprung, super tough. $7,650, and it is kind of a cool niche brand with a ton of street cred. This is for him, it's for her, and frankly, it's for me. I adore this thing. Okay, we end with a weird sort of off-the-radar brand and a watch line we may never have discussed before in the show, the Fortis Marine Master M40. Okay, new for 2021, the M40 is an attractively priced alternative from a brand I rarely bring on the show. 40 millimeters, this one has a feather in its cap. It's green, but it's also green, meaning it's made of recycled steel. Several colors are available, including this appealing woodpecker green, but also including gray and aqua. The dial depth and detail are quite excellent, including applique, the Fortis O, that's what the dial motif is, and wonderful depth. Also note the knurling on the bezel, which makes it easy and wonderful to grip, especially if it's wet, slippery, or your hands might be gloved. The case design is unique and handsomely detailed upon close examination, with bevels, squared off ends, sheer sides, and a bracelet held on by screws and bars, which I love for security. It glows nicely and includes a loomed seconds hand, which incredibly some dive watches don't. Now it uses a simple ETA 28242 base, and it's 300 meters water resistant, both fairly stock in the category, but it uses a super high grade balance and hairspring, one of the top grades of 2824 available, and yes, there is a difference. Plus, it's regulated in-house. This will probably keep chronometer time on your wrist. It comes with a 5-year warranty, uncommon at the entry level, and at $3,350 new, it's an acceptable price if you want to be different and support a scrappy, mid-sized luxury brand with a good reputation for sports watches, divers, and pilots both. All right. Wrist shots number 4. Jorge M. of Valencia, Spain, rides his Kawasaki Z900 RS with his Seiko 1959 re-edition. Green and green. Ryan M. of the UK finds success with his Rolex Explorer 2 Polar on a cognac strap that just works. Ghulam G. and his Seiko SKX 171 report from Kashmir in Pakistan. Thank you so much for joining us, Ghulam, along with that lovely shot on the former grounds of the royal family. Anonymous from Brazil chills with his Stogie and two-tone MOP Rolex Daytona, and Dewey W takes us home with his Zenith El Primero lightweight Spindrift Racing Edition and watches tonight featuring yours truly. Guys, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your analog on my digital, and be sure to check out Tim_Masso on Instagram. Thanks to you, thanks to Sean, who's always an ace, and thank you for making the best job in the world possible. Time out, Tim out. Thanks for logging on.